I'm Keith Spera from NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune. Welcome to Let's Talk. As a son of Aaron Neville, my guest today was born into New Orleans music royalty. For more than 40 years, he has carried on in the tradition, working with everyone from the Neville brothers to Keith Richards to his own excellently named band, Dumpsta Funk. In 2023, he released Touch My Soul, his first solo album in nearly 20 years. And he's probably the only musician who has opened up for the Rolling Stones at the Superdome, not once, but twice. Ivan Neville, thank you for being here, man.
Hey, Keith, how you doing, man?
Good to see you. Good to see you. Good to see you. Let's cut right to it. Being the son of Aaron Neville, was that an advantage or a disadvantage to you as you entered your own career in music?
Well, funny you asked that because, so it was definitely an advantage. Mm-hmm. And there's a little secret that people don't know about that. I was named, so I grew up junior, mm-hmm. for the most part. Mm-hmm. I was born Aaron Neville Jr. That was your name? Aaron Joseph Neville Jr. was my birth name.
Really?
When I was a baby, my mom's folks, my dad was a pretty rugged cat at that time, and he was maybe a little bit wild and whatnot. Yeah. And she was spending time with her folks, and me being a baby and being named after this guy that they didn't really look too fondly upon at that time, they changed my name to Ivan.
Wow.
So I have my dad's middle name, Joseph, mm-hmm. but the Junior's gone and Aaron's gone. So imagine the pressure that was immediate pressure off. So you're the oldest born son, oldest kid in the family,
right.
And you're kind of known as Junior. You're known as Little Aaron, but your name is Ivan. So I was like kind of set, and I didn't even realize it until later on. I'm like, oh, wow,
So wait, does it still say Aaron on your birth certificate?
It was destroyed. After Hurricane Katrina, those birth certificates no longer exist. So they made a new one that doesn't say that. But my original birth certificate said Aaron, scratched out.
Wow.
Ivan, written in cursive, handwritten, Junior scratched out, and I kept the middle name.
Wow.
Yeah.
What did your dad think about that? About the change?
Well, at the time, he had no say in the matter. but he soon thereafter, when my brother Aaron came along 3 years later, he was, my dad was, he had made, some leeway into the graces. He was kind of cool for a minute.
Mom, yes.
And then they named my second brother, they named him Aaron. So his name's Aaron James Neville Jr. So I have the Aaron Sr.'s middle name. So I grew up as kind of junior and in the shadow of the Aaron Neville, but my name was Ivan. So I was kind of an advantage all the way around.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people think, because your dad had a big hit with Tell It Like It Is in the 60s, that you guys, were well off, but that wasn't the case. I mean, y'all were like...
We were not. We lived in the same little house on Valley Street. The house is no longer there. It was replaced by some majestic uptown house, the way they look nowadays when they build them.
Right.
It was a little scrawny shotgun double house that we lived in until I was probably in my maybe 20 or 21 years old. So we lived there until he started making, he started gaining some success with the Neville brothers.
Yep.
And then further along when he did stuff with Linda Ronstadt, his solo career took off. But during the Tell It Like It Is era, oh no. And he had odd jobs as well on the side. My mom worked at Charity Hospital ever since I could remember. So yeah, we were like not well off, but we did have a little help because we had, like my dad's mom lived a block away from us. Mm-hmm. My dad's aunt, so we had family that lived nearby. Uncle RT lived down the block from us. And my mom's folks, they looked after us, so we got a lot of help.
Yeah, it was a classic village.
From the family.
Yes,
it was absolutely a village. Yes.
On Valley Street.
So we had help.
Yeah, absolutely. That neighborhood's changed so much. The old Neville stuff.
Yeah, it was something else.
Cyril, your Uncle Cyril, once said to me something about, he's talking about a park in the neighborhood, and he's like, yeah, that used to be, all this kind of crazy stuff used to happen there, and he's like, now it's where soccer moms take their dogs to go to the bathroom. It's like a whole different,
I passed down that street, Valley Street, and now that I think about it, I'm like, I mean, now it would be cool to name at least maybe from, I don't know, from Coliseum Street to Chapatoulas maybe, or but that Neville. It's got, you know what, I know none of it. Art's house is still there.
Yeah, right.
My Auntie Lorraine still lives in the house that Art was living in on Coliseum in Valence. Yeah.
So yeah, no, Neville Way, I can see it.
It needs to happen. It needs to happen.
Well, given your dad's experiences, I mean, you know, yeah, like you said, tell it like it is. It was a tough time for him. But you weren't discouraged from going into the music business yourself.
No, you know what? It was funny. Was when he was going through that stuff, and I knew he had this hit record, you know, because we listened to the radio. We knew something special was going on, but he wasn't really making any money. He wasn't profiting from it, but he was still hanging in it. And then my Uncle Art, he was. This is the early days of the meters. And he had already kind of seemed like an established cat, my Uncle Art was, and my dad. And I knew that they were grinding it out, man. They were hard workers. And, I was inspired by how they handled themselves. You know, yeah. I mean, my dad and he had some other stuff that he, was involved in as well. You know, some not so nice things. You know, he's got a book that I think he just finished. Not just recently, so there's an Aaron Neville book that will be out in the near future. You could probably hear some nice little tales in there.
You'll be telling it like it is.
Some stuff, exactly. Yes. So it was pretty. I was just a neighborhood kid who happened to go to Catholic school because I went to St. Stephen's. Mm-hmm. So I felt a little bit. I was like I was somewhat of a chameleon, as a kid. I would adjust to whatever was going on around me, and I knew the music thing was strong, because we all loved music, but my dad, seeing my dad get in the station wagon with my Uncle RT, I knew they were going to play somewhere, and then a couple of times I would go with my dad to a nightclub, and I know kids can't go in nightclubs, but I could because I was with Aaron.
Sure. And
he'd go play a gig at some place on Claiborne Avenue called the Desert Sands. And that was he did some gigs over there, and I heard stories about shows they played at the Nightcap. The Nightcap that used to be on Louisiana Avenue and Carondelet Street. And I was fascinated by all that because back in those days, I'm talking about the late '60s and stuff like that. The Saints football players, a lot of the African American guys, the black players would hang out at the Nightcap. The French Quarter wasn't so, it was still a little situation going on with, race relations and whatnot. Right. So these guys would go hang out at the Nightcap, and one day he brought me a football home from that had all the Saints players signed it, and I was like, wow, I remember some of those names of some of those football players. I felt pretty special. Like my dad knows Ernie Wheelwright and Walter Flea Roberts and
Walter Flea Roberts,
wow. John Gilliam. I was a football fan as a small kid, so it was a big deal. And my dad, something special,
That's right. Yeah. You started singing with the Neville Brothers as a teenager, I think, at Jazz Fest.
Around 1977, I played with, which it was actually called the Wild Chapatoulas. This first gig was with, they were backing up my Uncle Jolly, my great uncle, right. George Landry, Big Chief Jolly of the Wild Chapatoulas, and the gig was billed as the Wild Chapatoulas. And it was my dad, my uncle, it was the Neville Brothers with some Mardi Gras Indians and a backing band, and I was up there singing along. There's probably a couple of photos over the years that, that's been circulated, and I think Michael Smith took Leslie's dad. Leslie Smith's dad. Michael Smith. He took the photos, some amazing photos over the years. But there's a couple of me, my dad, and Cyril on the microphone together. That was from that 1977 Jazz Fest. I was just out of high school.
And 4 years after that gig, you guys, the Neville Brothers, opened for the Rolling Stones at the Superdome in 81.
Yeah,
81.
Yeah.
What do you remember about that? I mean, for a kid, you were what, 21, 22, somewhere up in there?
22, somewhere around there.
Was that intimidating at all to get up there in front of the Stones?
Actually,
no.
It was pretty fun. It was, it was a big deal. It was a big deal. We had already played a couple of shows with the Stones prior to that. We had opened up for them in Chicago, I remember, and somewhere in Louisville, Kentucky. And then there was going to be the big show in New Orleans at the Superdome. And I was pretty excited about it. I mean, the whole vibe of being in those surroundings with the Stones and what went along with that back in those days, early 80s. Hey, there was a big party on the Riverboat President that was thrown by the Stones. And this was like maybe before the concert was held, and they were in town obviously for a few days hanging out, and this party was something else, man. It was, and the entertainment at the party was whatever version of the Meters there was at that point, which was Zigaboo, Leo, Tony Hall was in their band with them. I don't know who else. It was the Fats Domino performed, Dr. John performed. This is a party. This is at the party at the SS President. And it was catered by a young upcoming chef by the name of Paul Prudhomme.
He did all right for himself eventually.
He made a big name like very soon thereafter. And there was a lot of food going around. And the funny thing was nobody was really eating any food because it was the early 80s and there were some other party favors that were being passed around that kind of prevented you from really having an appetite.
Right,
so
appetite suppressants.
That's all I have to say about
appetite suppressants.
That was some party.
No.
And then the big gig at the Dome, I was ready for it. It was something, man. It was something else. George Thorogood and the Destroyers played, and the Neville brothers opened up. It was amazing. It was an amazing hang.
You know, it's funny, you talk about the Rolling Stones party. I mean, there were, Led Zeppelin through another legendary New Orleans party where they had, I think, Professor Longhair and all those guys. So those British bands, I mean, really dug the New Orleans music thing and wanted to be associated and wanted to hang out with them and hear them play. So it's kind of cool. Fast forward a bunch of years, 2019, your band Dumpster Funk opens for the Rolling Stones at the Superdome.
In the Dome, yeah.
Whole different environment, not quite the same party scene.
No, way different, but it was a good hang still. Yeah.
Y'all played, I think you ended that set with the Earl King song Street Parade.
Street Parade with Soul Rebels playing along with us. Yeah, that was some time. Yeah.
And you worked a little of the Who Dat chant in there?
Yes, we did. In the Dome, man, home crowd. That was amazing. That was so cool. And it hadn't occurred to me that, okay, I'd done this before. Open up for the Stones in the Dome. And you know what, that was one of those gigs, man. That night was really special because, like, you played a lot of shows, and a lot of them are good, and some of them are average, and some of them are really special. And every now and again, you have this one show that's just amazing, and everything's just working right. The chemistry is just there, the vibe, the crowd, music sounding good, and nothing goes wrong technically, and you just have one of those amazing shows that's memorable, like, and you want that show to happen at a place like this. It hardly ever does.
Right.
It hardly ever does. Usually that show happens in Poughkeepsie, New York on a Tuesday night with 100 people, maybe 50 people, but for this one happened in the Superdome,
in front of
opening up for the Rolling Stones.
Tens of thousands
of people. It was amazing.
That was a good time.
Yeah.
There was, and we talked about earlier, you talked about the party favorites at the earlier Stones gig. I mean, and obviously, you've been clean and sober for what, 25 years now, I think.
This August will be 25 years.
Which is an amazing accomplishment. There was a Rolling Stone, you tell a story about the infamous Rolling Stones show in 1994 at Giant Stadium. Yeah. Memorable for the wrong reasons, but indicative of kind of how far you come. What was give us a background on what that story was there.
Well, it's funny because around the early 90s, I started, so you're playing, you want to be a musician, you're a musician, and at some point, in the late 70s, early 80s, mid 80s, there's a lot of stuff going on. There were a lot of drugs being taken, and it was a fun time. It was fun times, drinking a lot and doing stuff and whatnot. And at a certain point in the 90s, it really kind of turned on me, like that lifestyle. That lifestyle just changed, and it wasn't in my favor at all.
Right.
Doing all of that stuff. I had a lot of fun at certain times, but by the time I I played and sang backups. I played keyboard on Voodoo Lounge on that album.
The Rolling Stones album,
Yes.
Voodoo Lounge.
Voodoo, yes.
Right.
I played on that record.
And you've been working with Keith Richards
I
in
had
his
been
solo
working with
band,
Keith
his band, The
off and
Expensive
on for a
Winos.
few years. We had
Right.
done a couple of Winos, a couple of Keith solo records and stuff like that. And but at a certain point, my life just started spiraling kind of out of control, whereas my lifestyle in that arena, taking drugs and drinking and whatnot, it stopped working for me. And it was just not fun anymore at all. And it was, because there's a point where there's fun versus consequences. So you're having so much fun, you may be willing to pay the consequences.
Right.
At this point, the fun was gone, and it was just consequences. And are you going to continue doing that? I don't know. So at around I think it was 95 or so.
94 maybe? Yeah,
somewhere
yeah.
up in there, the Stones were touring the Voodoo Lounge tour. I was invited to go up to New York, to Giant Stadium in New Jersey.
Right.
They flew me up there to go hang out with my friend Keith. Invited me up there to come and hang out and just to come see. I had played on that record, and I was maybe deserving of I aspired to maybe play with the Stones, and there was talk that maybe I would get the gig playing with them, but I did not.
That's a modest expectation, maybe play with the Stones. Yeah.
I thought maybe I would, but it's funny that in the way it worked out, and I'm maybe fortunate that I didn't get that gig, because the kind of excessive lifestyle I was leading at the time, I would have had more access to more party favors and more money and all of that. So, who knows? Maybe I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you right now had I gone down that road, but I did not. So I was invited to the Stone show at Giant Stadium, and I remember I was living here in New Orleans at the time. And I remember hanging out at my mom's house, trying to clean up for a couple of days. And I wanted to show up, and I wanted to be in good shape. And I showed up there, and then I started doing what we do, and I started drinking like a fish.
Right.
And I'm backstage, and we're talking and hanging out. And I remember, talking about, you're going to come up and play. I was going to go up and play on "Start Me Up" was the song I was going to go up and play on.
With the Stones.
And
okay.
yes, I was going to go up, and then I was instructed on what I was looking at the set list. I know when I would venture off toward the stage at a certain song on the list, and then I'd be there in time to go up and play. It wasn't like nobody was going to announce me. I was just going to go up and ease up on the keyboard and be amongst the band playing. That's it.
Right.
It wasn't like they were going to say, "Oh, ladies and gentlemen, No, it wasn't nothing like that.
Right.
I was just going to get to play with them. I was a little overserved myself. I was drinking a little too much. I was doing a little too much or whatever. And I vaguely remember meeting Lenny Kravitz in the hallways of the Giant Stadium. Mm-hmm. There's a picture from that night. Mm-hmm. I'll show it to you at some point.
Okay.
Of myself, Keith, Ron Woods, and Lenny Kravitz. And right when we took that picture, I remember feeling so out. I was headed. And that was kind of almost the last coherent thing I really remembered, was taking that picture. Then I was sitting in the dressing room. By this time, they were gone on stage and they were playing. And then I passed out in the dressing room. And I woke up. I vaguely remember seeing a silhouette of someone walking around in the dressing room. I guess they were taking stuff out of there. I missed the whole show. I woke up and the show was over. And they did what's called a runner. They were going to Canada the next day, they were leaving straight from the stage to a van to fly out and go to Canada.
So you didn't even tell them goodbye?
No, they were gone. Wow. And I woke up in there, that's what I woke up to. So that was about as low as you could go, I think, right? But it took me a few more years to actually change my lifestyle.
Right.
This was 95, 98 is when I surrendered and threw up the white flag and said, okay, I give up.
And as a result of that, the last 25 years, you've lived an entirely new life. Of productivity and creativity. You've got a great relationship. You've got a 9-year-old son that you've been present for and been able to be like a great dad. So it's like a whole different ballgame.
Absolutely, absolute blessing.
So in that time, we talked about this in the intro, you've been very busy with Dumpster Funk, done a bunch of stuff, hadn't done a solo record in almost 20 years. You put out one this year called Touch My Soul. What finally told you it was time to make another solo record?
You know, I'm gonna go back to just a little bit in explaining this and tell you what, subconsciously when I started the band Dumpster Funk, I was offered a solo gig at the Jazz and Heritage Festival. And you know what? I was in early recovery. I had gotten sober in '98. First gig with Dumpster was '03 at the Jazz Fest. And I wanted some partners. I wanted some running buddies. I wanted, you know, like George Porter running. I wanted some running partners to hang with me.
Right.
I wanted a band. I didn't want to be the solo guy up front. I wanted some guys that we would take turns driving and stuff like that. So I called up Nick Daniels, Tony Hall, my cousin Ian, Raymond Weber, and a few others, and we started this band called Dumpster Funk. And we've been playing as that group ever since. So over the years, my last record was right before that. I had done this record called Saturday Morning Music, which was later packaged as Scrape.
Yep,
so
Scrape.
If you see a record called Scrape and you see a record called Saturday Morning Music, it's the same record.
Same record. Don't buy it twice.
The same record.
Right.
And that was the last solo record that I had done. Now, we used a couple of songs from that record that kind of kicked off Dumpster's repertoire. There were a few songs from that record. One song called Scrape, a song called Ugly Truth, that were early, and they were both two bass songs that I could play with my two bass players, Nick and Tony. So it was incorporated in that format. And so over the years, it never really occurred to me to do a solo record. It really didn't come to mind. And I guess during the pandemic, Dumpster had some material that we had developed over the previous couple years before that. And we decided we were going to finish that music. And we were offered a deal to do a record with an independent label. And around the same time, around 2018, 2019, I had written one song.
Wow.
I was inspired to write one song on my own, a song called Hey All Together. And I had developed that little tune. I had gotten some friends to be a part of that song.
Bonnie Raitt, Michael
McDonald, my dad, David Shaw, got Trombone Shorty on it.
Yep.
And this was a one standalone song. So when Dumpster got the deal to put out its music as a record, I was offered to do a record as well, based on that one song.
Now you had to write a whole album.
Now I got to write another 8, 9, 10 songs or something like that. So that's
how it came. So the title track, "Touch My Soul," that was written a little bit. You had a little bit of a nudge from Ashley.
So I was well into this process of coming up with songs, and I would leave the studio or whatever. I would come home and I'd play some stuff, and I would always bounce stuff. I would hear how Isaiah responded. Isaiah's he's my 9-year-old boy, you know, and I would play stuff for Ashley and see what they thought of it and whatnot. And at some point, you know, I'd written songs about personal experience before in my life, you know, over the years. But Ashley was like, "When you gonna write me a song?" I'm like, "What? It's not that simple, you know."
It's a lot of pressure.
Come on now, give me a break. You know, come on, man. What are you doing? And you know what? And then I was maybe a week or so later, I was sitting at the piano and I started playing a little thing, and I was kind of inspired. I thought about where I was in my life and kind of, how I've grown as a person, you know, as a human being, and all this stuff, and the love that I was feeling for her, for my son, for just, you know, for life in general. I'm glad to be around. I'm glad that I might, you know, be able to hang around here for a few more years and stuff like that. Just all of this stuff kind of came to mind, and that brought the song "Touch My Soul" to life. And no, go ahead.
Well, I would say, yeah. It was originally inspired by her, but now the song ended up being more about your relationship with music in general.
Yes, because when I think of music, I think of how I'm a fan of music. I love music, and A lot of times, you know, in my car, I listen to Sirius radio, and I got a bunch of different stations dialed in, and I listen to older stuff from back in the days, current stuff. I listen to various types of music, but there's songs that I hear that remind me exactly of a time and a place, and I can smell what was cooking maybe that day, or things of that nature. Like I can exactly remember when I first heard this song, and so music has touched my soul over the years like that, you know. And it makes time stand still. A song makes time stand still, you know. And for that reason, I thought about how music has touched my soul. So, and then I thought about that song. I'm like, oh wow, maybe I'll call the record "Touch My Soul." And I hope that a piece of one song hits you a little bit and makes you think a little bit and feel something, you know. And you could make you feel really happy. It might make you feel sad, you know. But all of those feelings are relevant to, you know, it balances out in the long run, you know.
Amen. We've only got a couple minutes left here, so but the record runs the gambit though, because talking about these emotions, you've got Greatest Place on Earth, which is kind of a New Orleans party celebratory song, and then the record ends with a solo piano piece called Beautiful Tears, which was a meditation partly inspired by your mom's passing.
Yeah.
And so did you mean to do that to wrap it all up here with, you know, kind of run that gambit of emotions, or is that just
You know, it was absolutely unintentional. I mean, it was totally by coincidence, because by the time I got to where I had 8 songs finished, I needed 2 more. I had the last song. I covered the Talking Heads tune, "This Must Be the Place,"
which is great, yeah.
Which was a fun pick. And then I had the whole Dumpster Funk band come in the studio, and we recorded that song as a group,
right,
which I thought was really cool. And I think it came out nice. And then I needed 2 more songs, and I had what I thought was maybe writer's block. Okay, and I read something recently that there's no such thing as writer's block. There's a time to talk and there's a time to listen. And that was the time to listen. So I waited and I came up with a song called "Pass It All Around," which I was very inspired, and I was very happy, and I felt blessed that this little piece of music and a message came to me in a song form, and I was able to present it and put it on this record. And I felt so fortunate about that. And then something happened, Uvalde, Texas.
Right, there's a shooting, right.
That happened. Those kids were, you know, just like unfortunate, another incident like that. So school shooting, innocent kids, lives taken and stuff like that. And that, I sat at the piano and I started playing this little piece. And that became the song "Beautiful Tears." And the reason it kind of evolved my feeling about the song, because I thought about my mom when she passed in '07. My grandmother, who lived to be 92 years old, Miss Beatrice Rue Taylor. She, what a lady.
Yeah.
So she told me, so when she lost her daughter, my mom, at 67. My mom was 67 years old when she passed in 2007. And my grandmother told me, she said, "Your mother died a beautiful death." She told me that, and I'm like, "What do you mean, a beautiful death? I never knew there was such a thing." And then she explained to me what she envisioned. She says, "Well, when I left the hospital, when they pronounced your mom, when she transitioned, I looked up to the sky, there was a few clouds. It wasn't a particularly cloudy day, but there was like one big cloud, and there was a few little small clouds, and I envisioned them as being like little steps. And there was your mom going up those steps." And I'm like, oh wow, that was so beautiful and sad and all of that. And I was like, wow. But it didn't really occur to me that day. Later on, it occurred to me about finding beauty in something like that.
Amen.
And finding beauty in life where you might think there isn't no beauty. So that became the song called "Beautiful Tears." That's it.
And it's an amazing way to end the record, Ivan. It really is. Man, I appreciate you sharing all these stories with us today. This has been a great chat.
Thank you so much.
Best of luck with everything going
forward.
Thanks
for inviting me, Keith.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you guys for watching. I'm Keith Spera. We'll see you next time on Let's Talk.